Okay then. I didn't think this game was that long. So I found a mare. In the darkness, Kid Zed's lips twist into a grin that turned my blood cold. I'm not sure if we're supposed to be here yet, but let's go. Kid opened the door and slipped inside. That another familiar track. It was Lynx's room, but he didn't seem to be around. Hey, the bugger's gone and scarpered 'cause he heard I was coming. There was something deeply unpleasant about this room. There wasn't anything unusual about the furniture and fittings, not how they looked or how they were made, but taken as a whole, it all felt discordant. Was this a reflection of Lynx? A seemingly ordinary facade that hid a disturbing truth only some could see. Let's see what we can find. The desk drawers, the paintings on the wall, the vase on top for the side table, we left no stone unturned. There didn't seem to be anything suspicious. But as I scanned the room, something unusual caught my eye. There was a pedestal in one corner with a significant-looking scarlet cloth drawn over it. I slowly raised my hand toward it. Be careful what you touch in here, warned Module. I pulled my hand back timidly. The then-take cloth flipped back with a flutter without me having laid a finger on it. Did that thing set move by itself? Exclaimed Kid, her eyes wide open with surprise. Did that thing just move by itself? Exclaimed Kid, her eyes wide open with surprise. Gripped by curiosity, we moved in to see what it had been hiding. It was a large antique mirror of an elaborately decorated style I'd seen before. It wasn't the kind of thing that would normally seem out of place in an old manor like this, and it. Wait. Something ain't right, said Kid. Meanwhile, I was captivated by the gaze of the statue of Venus reflected in the mirror. Oh, snap! Suddenly, the eyes of the statue shone with light. What is your desire? Oh, it's a monkey play. It spoke with a voice that was crystal clear, yet smoky and husky. What is your desire? Oh, I guess I didn't turn the reverb stuff back on. What is your desire? The mirror. It's speaking, I stammered. Ah, a whispering mirror, muttered Magil, as if he'd seen them 8,000 times before. What one of those? Kid gave Magil a quizzical glance. A magical mirror in which a spirit dwells. The spirit can freely move between its own and other mirrors, and will share its wisdom with those who ask. Perhaps we should ask it something. I decided to ask it about something that has been on my mind for some time. Both of these are probably going to get a bop to the head, but I think asking about Magil might be safe. I want to know about Magil Past, I said, casting a furtive glance in his direction. As you wish. The statue of Venus in tame mirror turned her gaze downward. As she did so, darkness spread across the mirror's surface. But if nothing else took its place, there was only an ending black. What did it mean? Leave the stupid mirror alone and get back to work, snapped Kid. She was already poking and prodding at other things in the room. I stepped away from the mirror and started searching the room again. I took another look around the room. I didn't rate our chances of finding much of interest, no matter how hard we looked. Hey kid, you've ransacked a few rooms in your time, and you think I got your thief's intuition tingling. She was scrabbling among the stuff on the desk. At the sound of my voice, she immediately turned to face me. In each of her hands was a pen. Prepare to suffer links. Within minutes, the room was covered in scribbles and graffiti. It was everywhere, the furniture, the walls, even the floor. Your mom stinks and your face is like a squished tomato and your breath is like rotten fish, haha. It was shocking stuff. Well, apparently I can save the game because I hit something. Phew, that a load of me chest, said Kid, satisfied, as she casually tossed the pins to the floor. What the heck was all that about? Not sure really. It was fun, though. And with that, she turned toward the door, clearly very pleased with herself indeed. I felt bad for the mirror, so I stopped to give it a quick wipe before we left the otherwise completely ruined room. The corridor stretched out beyond the door. We retraced our steps. Eventually, we came across an ornate door on the left-hand side. It was Riddle's room. Lynx's daughter. Well, that's different. I guess the roles of General Viper and Lynx are actually reversed in terms of who owns the manor and related to Riddle. Cause in Chrono Cross, the manor is General Viper's. and Riddle is General Viper's daughter. We continued down Tick Corridor until we reached an intersection. There was a left turn in the corridor leading to some stairs going upward. The passage to the stairway was short. With Kid leading the way, we started to climb the narrow staircase. At the top, we found another intersection. Taking the corridor to the right would lead us to a dead end with a large door, while the way to the left led to Tate Terrace. The narrow side passage in front of us was open. So this map I'm looking at has the terrace in the wrong location. I guess we can find out. We headed down the side passage. At the end of it, we came to an old, immaculately polished door. Kid gently pushed the door ajar and peeked into the room. The next thing I knew, she'd slipped inside, Madrill and I followed. Looks like a study. The room was lit by the moonlight coming through the long, slender windows, slanting down in pale beams through the darkness. It was pretty big for a study, with an immaculate antique desk dominating the center. There were rows of bookshelves lined with thick, dusty old tomes. The wall to the rear of the room was decorated with paintings, and shelves of vases and painted plates stood before it. They all seemed to be curios from foreign lands. I went over to the desk and started searching the drawers. There I found a neatly arranged set of pens, ink bottles, and other writing materials. Nothing of interest, in other words. Don't let Kid know, she might scribble over more things. A small portrait on the desk caught my eye. It was a picture of a young girl with a gentle smile on her lips. Who was she? That the girl Lynx adopted. If you ask me, it wasn't 'cause he was looking to help the needy, said Kid, peering over my shoulder. She wrinkled her nose in distaste. Emph. Not even a looker. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't a loud knock, but in the bottomless silence of the night it might as well have been a thunderclap. Kid and I stood bolt upright and turned toward it. Magil, meanwhile, hid in the shadows, drifting away like smoke. Panicked, I whispered to Kid. Hide under the desk. You what? There's no time. I shoved Kid under the desk, then darted under it with her. Oof, it was more cramped than I thought it would be. I packed myself in as best I could, but Kid and I found ourselves in an awkward tangle of legs and arms. Slowly, the door opened. Flickering candlelight spread from the doorway with a warm glow. A shadowy figure appeared at the threshold. I tried to pack myself into the space under the desk just a little tighter, and stilled my breath. I looked down for a moment, and my heart skipped a beat. Kid's lips were right there. Uh, no, you're not gonna do that, sir. For a moment, everything else seemed to drift away. The pink bow of her mouth was so soft, so perfectly formed. Really. Suddenly, my heart was beating so loud I thought my chest would burst. I tore my eyes away and squeezed them tightly shut. But it seemed that whoever it was didn't mean to come in. They simply stood there. Strange, I thought I heard something, but the lord of the manor is away, of course. Why would there be anyone in here? I have to get over my nerves. Everything was fine until we heard the news that Poor was on the move. The figure quietly closed the door, plunging the room back into darkness. The voice trailed off to a whisper. We remained motionless, keeping our ears pricked for any sign of an unwelcome return. All we heard were footsteps moving away. As I stayed hidden, listening for trouble, a thought began to cross my mind. Kid sure does smell nice. This again. Wait, Serge, you gonna move your ash or what? She whispered into my ear, her breath tickling as she spoke. Oh, heck. I'm so sorry. I rushed to my feet in a panic, smacking my head right into the top of the desk. Ow. Cradling my head in my hands, I crawled out from underneath. Whoa, that stings. Kid followed right after and stood up looking down at me on the floor. Not your most heroic moment. You all right? Yeah, I'll let. She took a look around the room. No sign of that dirtbag Lynx. Lucky for him, she snorted. So poor has made its move. Magdalene emerged from the shadows, contemplating the news we'd overheard. Kid, if the rumors are true, we might well be about to find ourselves in a very difficult situation. This seemed to set her thinking. Kor was a powerful nation that ruled the southern continent. I'd heard it was a prosperous land's recent and sudden development had pushed it far ahead of its neighbors. Which made me wonder, what would its inhabitants want here, out in the sticks? They couldn't be after the frozen flame, too, could they? As valuable as it might be, a jewel was just a jewel in the grand scheme of things. I couldn't imagine it being an item of national interest. I mean, ultimately, it was just a pretty rock ride. Let them do what they want. If everyone's busy playing soldiers, they won't be bothering us. Come on. We've got things to do. She headed for the door. Hello, Strider. We left the room and made our way back down the side passage. Rattle. Kid stopped us. There's something there. I listened carefully. Rattle, rattle, rattle. A figure appeared in the darkness on the other side of the corridor. It's a Skullcon again. Strider, I need a headpad emote for that first. Girlden can do it because her 3D model has moving hands. It's a skeleton. We readied ourselves for a fight. I think this fight might turn out the same. Come on then. I leaped at the skeleton. It lashed out with its sword. I guess not. Blood dripped from my face. The tip of the blade had scratched my cheek. Eat. I jumped back in panic. Well, an emote lets you do a hit pat without a reading. Hope you brought your brown trousers, grumbled Kid. We squared off against the skeleton. It threw the sword it was carrying to the ground and took a step forward. And then it twisted its body into a strange pose. Wait, is it doing what I think it is? Oh, what the crap? It proceeded to contort itself further, adopting a shape that could only be described as highly suggestive. For a moment, no one knew quite how to respond. What the bloody heck? What should we? Wait, Kid. Look at Mag. Magil seemed completely bewitched. There was no way he'd be any use to us in this state. Or what were we going to do? Come on then. I charged at the skeleton. I took advantage of the opening created when it raised its sword and kicked it as hard as I could in its lower spine. There was an almighty crack as the bone snapped and the skeleton fell in two. A split second later, Kit landed a massive blow on the top half. With its skull shattered, the skeleton immediately came to a halt. Huh? Guess you can fight after all. We had defeated the skeleton. Kit turned her attention back to Magiel. Can't believe this Drongo, though. Thwack! She brought her fist down hard on his head. Maybe that'll wake you up. Now, if we're done here, let's get a bloody move on. What was I? Wait a second, what's that? There was a leather bag on the ground. Containing some recently cooked meat. Oh no, you're not gonna eat the floor meat. Lucky me. I bit into the meat without a moment's hesitation. After devouring the unexpected windfall, I felt a little better. Oh, yeah. Where's my share? Whoa! I'd taken a few knocks, but I was all right. A scrape or two wouldn't stop me. Maybe you ain't such a drongo after all. Just goes to show. An old weirdo can make something of themselves if they put their mind to it. Kid's eyes glinted with mischief. We made our way back down the dark side passage leading from the study. Eventually, we arrived back at the intersection. Some stairs led downward, and the corridor branched left and right, with the right branch leading back to the terrace. Serge, we don't have time for this. We're not gonna magically find something useful by trying the same bloody room over and over again. Let's go someplace else. There was a tinge of annoyance in Kid's voice, but she wasn't being unreasonable. Without some kind of lid, we'd waste all night trying to find something. We left the room and retraced our steps. Okay, let's go in the last direction we haven't gone. We continued onward past where the stairs and the side passage emerged into the main corridor. We found ourselves in front of some ornate double doors, and we went inside. Kid gently pushed the heavy doors open and peeked inside. Doesn't look like anyone's in there. It seemed to be the main hall of the manor. There was a massive table, beautiful decorations on the walls, and thick columns decorated with sculptures of birds and beasts. Fixed to the wall at the back towered a tremendous pipe, organ like a burnished black mountain. Dozens of candles provided a dim, flickering light, sending the corners of the room dancing in and out of shadow. Several enormous portraits glowered down from high up on the wall. Were these members of Lynx's family? I was busy staring at a painting depicting young husband and wife when I realized that their eyes had turned to look right at me. Okay, they hadn't, don't worry. This isn't about to turn into some dumb ghost story. It just looked that way because of the way the flickering light of the candles reflected against the glossy oil paints. Obviously. Probably. This place gives me the creeps. Included a load of all those ugly mugs. There's nothing for us here. Let's look somewhere else. Neither Magel nor I had any objections. We left the hall and returned to the corridor. After a short walk down the corridor, the terrace came into view. We kept following the corridor. A short way along the corridor, running from the right-hand side of the terrace, we found an ancient-looking door. Legion. On our right. A short way along the corridor, running from the right-hand side of the terrace, we found an ancient-looking door. Again. On our right. Kid pressed an ear against it, listening for any signs of life. Dead quiet. Don't reckon there's anybody in there. We opened the door. In we go. Kid stilled her breath and reached for the handle. The door wasn't locked. It swung slowly open. What this room supposed to be? Place is a dump. Kit had poked her head in through the door, taking a quick peek to see if there was anyone inside, and was disappointed by what she found. The room was large and littered with peculiar-looking machinery and knickknacks, all of which were covered in dust and had seemingly been dumped there haphazardly. Everything looked like it had been there rusting for a very long time. The ends of the room were totally dark, and it was impossible to tell just how big it was, or even what the walls and floor looked like. It seemed the manor's inhabitants had turned the old clock tower into a makeshift storage space some time ago. I stepped warily inside. Leave that alone. I looked over toward Magel and saw Kit trying to pull something from the shadows. It was a huge sword that appeared to be very old indeed. You don't need an old bludgeon. It'll only get in the way. And as much as an antique as it is, it won't fetch much on the market in that condition. Yeah, I reckon it might, there's plenty of collectors who just love old bits of junk. Well, some old bits of junk. Pouting, Kid left the sword where she stood. At least she put it back down gently. It was then that we heard a voice from the shadows. And what exactly are you doing in here, Hum? I just about jumped out of my skin. Who's there? Kit and Maggo turned to face the voice, ready for a fight. A wizened crone emerged from the shadows. She was hunched over and wore a hood draped over her face. I could tell at a glance that she wasn't just old, she was positively ancient. It's just some doddery old bag. What do you think you're doing, sneaking up on us like that? Kid's shoulders relaxed as tension left her body. Kid's shoulders relaxed as the tension left her body. Magil, however, continued to give the woman a piercing stare. Oh, what an impish little thing you are! Here to visit a friend, perhaps. Not in the dead of night, I suspect. The crone narrowed her eyes. Let's get a closer look at you, Yes, you must be here to get your revenge in Lynx. How did she? My heart jumped. She seemed to know exactly who we were. We were in trouble. What if she sounded the alarm? We'd have to give up on the treasure and run for our lives. What were we going to do? Let's just pick the first option. So what if we are? Kid narrowed her eyes right back at the crown. What's it to you if we're here to get our revenge on old Lynxy boy? You gotta do something about it. Heh. You need for change, do you? The crone chuckled madly, her small frame shaking. Aha, the boldness of youth. Yes, that's the spirit. You what? Kid looked at the crone, completely confused. I was no less mystified. carry two on about. There's another familiar tune. Oh, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago, yes. It was around then an innocent young thief stole into the manor, looking to singe Lord Lynx's whiskers. She couldn't have been much older than 10 now that I think of it. Scoped, my gaze turned to Kid. A wet glint had appeared in Kid's eyes, but her glare was like ice. It certainly felt as if the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped below freezing. With a chuckle, the crone continued her story, pretending not to have noticed the change in mood. She was an orphan, you know. Came after Lynx to avenge a woman who'd loved her like her own daughter. But all the vengefulness in the world couldn't change the fact that she was only a little girl. She was no match for Lynx's men, sadly, and they quickly captured her. Lynx is the kind of man one would fear to have for an ally, never mind a foe. Had it not been for the timely assistance of a friend of hers, the girl would have certainly been executed. The way the people of the manor told it, the very shadows pitied the girl, and rushed in to spirit her away. I wonder how much of the tale could be true. I have nothing but sympathy for those who know failure, of course. You can't win all the time. And sometimes, against all the odds, fate really can be foiled and the clockwork of history sent into disarray. No, the ones I have no patience for are those who do not recognize their failure or who fail and choose to give up as a result. The crone looked up from under her hood, stared Kid directly in the face, and grinned. Kid's anger faded, giving way to a dumbfounded expression. If you wish to steal the jewel from Lynx, if you truly wish to triumph, you will have to let go of a treasure of your own, Kid. For as long as you cling onto it, the hands of your clock will never move, they. They'll stay exactly where they came to rest all those years ago. Who are you? Ho ho. Me. Why, I'm just an old bag like you said. I do apologize. I must have taken up a lot of your time with all my battling. I'll leave you in peace. Oh, but before I go. The crone turned to face me. You seem to be injured, young man. If you wish, I can take a look at your wounds. With all the attention suddenly turned toward me, I panicked a little. What? All right then. Please do. The crone muttered a few words as her bony fingers drew sigils in the air. A pale, gentle light began to surround my body, filling me with a strange warmth. Strike a light? That no ordinary spell? Kid was impressed. I felt my wounds healing and heard a nostalgic melody that soothed the wounds in my heart. Before I realized it, the crone was gone. Hey, hey, lady. Kid strained her eyes, scanning the darkness. But there was no one to be seen, and her calls went unanswered. Who the bloody heck was that? Kid looked like she'd just woken up on the floor of the Laughing Pig after a few too many. And what did she mean about you having to let go of a treasure? Well, we won't find any answers here. Time to move on. Magil brought us back down to earth, emotionless as always. It almost seemed as if he thought nothing had happened at all. Yeah, I guess you're right. Kid walked quickly to the door, keen to move on. Hold it, you! Just as I was about to follow Kid out of the room, she jabbed me in Tay's side with her elbow. Just as I was about to follow Kid out of the room, she jabbed me in the side with her elbow. You stingy little bugger, Sarge. Why didn't you tell her to share some of that healimjik with the rest of us? Classic Kid. The door led back into the core, which stretched off to the left and right. Continuing on down the corridor, we came across a rather sturdy-looking door on our left. A little further on stood a stairway leading upward. Well, this door is clearly meant to keep something safe. If there ain't some kind of treasure behind it, me name ain't Kekade. Well, this door's clearly meant to keep something safe. If there ain't some kind of treasure behind it, me name ain't Kid. Sniff, sniff. Yep, that the smell of cold, hard cash. All right, she muttered to herself as she began to inspect the door more closely. Is that the smell of cold, hard cash? All right, she muttered to herself as she began to inspect the door more closely. Bah! What am I stupid? Of course, it's bloody locked. Kit had tried the door handle a few times before giving it a grumpy kick. The bloody door's got a magic barrier on it, and the blooded barrier's got a barrier of its own to boot. It'll take more'n me putting the boot in to get through all that. I see. Then, unless we find the key, we don't have a hope of getting inside. Reckon I can handle a key hunt, especially if it's that idiot Lynx who's hidden it. If we can find his room, I'll sniff it out in 2 seconds flat. You just watch. There was little more we could do here, so we decided to look elsewhere. The corridor ended at the foot of some stairs. With Kid in the lead, we headed upwards. It was dark, and the stairwell was narrow. We watched our footing carefully as we climbed. The stone of the steps was worn smooth with age, and I lost count of how many there were as we spiraled onward and upwards. An awful sense of foreboding haunted me. I had no idea why, but it felt as though we were a matching to the gallows. An awful sense of foreboding haunted me. I had no idea why, but it felt as though we were matching to the gallows. An awful sense of foreboding haunted me. I had no idea why, but it felt as though we were marching to the gallows. When we arrived at the top of the stairs, we were greeted by an old, heavy door, looming in the silence. All was deathly silent, and Dee's still clammy air added to the sense of Smith's apprehension. All was deathly silent, and Dee's still clammy air added to the sense of ominous apprehension. All was deathly silent, and the still clammy air added to the sense of ominous apprehension. Something's very wrong here, I muttered without thinking. I hear cursed whispers from the door, Medramatta doing nothing to lift the mood. Grow Uppelia, Kid shot back at us derisively. She was already examining the door. Well, it ain't locked, and I don't hear anyone inside. All right, here goes. Kit tried the handle. The door opened, and with a slow, heavy swing revealed what lay beyond. It was a small cylindrical room that appeared to be the inside of one of the stone towers. It was completely deserted, and there were no windows. What this supposed to be? Something about this place gives me the creeps. Still standing in the doorway, Kid seemed suddenly taken aback. There might be something in here. Let's take a closer look. A closer look at a bloody empty room. Might as well, I guess. We did climb all them stairs. Kid stepped through the door, grumbling under her breath. I scanned the room, and then noticed something on the floor. The flagstones were covered in dozens of narrow scratches, and in places there were thick black stains. Something in the stains spoke of a horror that no amount of scrubbing would ever wash away. A malice and a sadness beyond imagining. There's something written here. Crouching in front of a wall, Magil was inspecting some brownish markings that looked like more of the same stains. Someone's carved letters into the wall and scrambled them using blood magic. Kid had gone over to take a look. Looks pretty old hard to read, too. Some of it's been worn away. Let's sway. I cannot hold out much longer. My only hope now is to leave the acacia signet in this room. The acacia signet. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. We jumped to our feet with a start. From above us, we heard an unsettling creaking sound. The walls and floor began to tremble. What the heck going on? Kid's eyes darted around the room as she desperately tried to figure out what was happening. The creaking sound from above continued, and the ceiling moved ominously closer. Up there, oh, that's not good. We've walked right into a bloody trap. Kid bit her lip. We've got to do something and fast. We don't have time to sit and think about this. Yark. Kid sprang at the door like an arrow, slamming into its shoulder first. But it was far too heavy, and her light frame bounced right off it. Damn it! Michael raced toward the door like the wind, smashing into it but with ferocious force. It made a creaking sound and shook from the impact, but stood firm. Desperately, I hurled myself at it too. Me. The shock of the impact rushed through my body, but it was no good. Meanwhile, the rusty creaking from above continued, as did the ceiling's inexorable journey downward. And to make matters worse, now countless blades were popping in and out. Search! Magil, this is gonna take the three of us. Timing our blows, we all charged the door at once. Once. Twice. A third time. And then the door was open, and we were collapsed in a heap in the corridor outside. What? Behind us, we heard the sound of the bladed ceiling grinding on the stone floor of the tower room. The metallic scraping noise it made was awful. We could only look on in silent horror at the fate we'd so narrowly evaded. The machinery continued for a short while, before slowly coming to a stop. It seemed the ceiling trap had finally finished its grisly work. Bugger me. Talk about intense surprise. Is it some sort of execution chamber? Magil continued, seeming to be deep in though, in any case, that writing mentioned Acacia. Yeah, what was all that about? I asked. The Acacia Dragoons, the like knightly order serving General Viper, who once governed the territory of Gales Fork to the west. Former knightly order, I should say. They were wiped out more than a decade ago by the lord of this very manor, no less. Oh, thanks for tea history lesson, Mag. Kate rose to her feet, patting off the dust. Too bad we're not here for fairy tale nights. Come on, we've got a lot more exploring left to do. Magla shrugged silently, and we headed back to the stairs. We're going to have to leave off there. We're almost at the 12-hour point. So thank you for watching. Have a good morning.